Australia, Canada, and the Netherlands. Australia, Canada, Netherlands, and Russia. And, of course, the United States is so far ahead of everybody else that I don't even count it. Oh. And then we have the .govs and the .edus and the .mils. I just love it when the .mils and the .govs show up there on our usage charts.
So I'm not quite clear though yet whether you are in favor or think it's unnecessary to have a fairness doctrine, like what Roger said, that in today's day and age you don't need it. Okay.
Well,
on the other hand,
I think it's one of the most stupid ideas that has ever existed. That was what I was trying to say. But in case they do bring it in, then people like us need to join our little heads together and see how we can turn it so that we can use it to our advantage. And if we can figure out how to use it to our advantage.
I'll give you a couple of points of clarification. First of all, in America, the people own the airwaves. Supposedly. So I don't know who the people are collectively, but I guess it's all of us. So the motivation behind the fairness doctrine is that the people own the airwaves and a private entity is entrusted with the broadcast signal through the Federal Communications Commission. And so the Federal Communications feels that they have some obligation to be the arbiter of justice and fairness on the airwaves. Because after all, it's the people's radio waves that these companies are using, these evil profiteers are using to make money. So, when you come from that premise, then you take something like the 9/11 issue, and the 9/11 issue is the media is going to tell you they're not taking a position, they're just reporting on the official government findings, right? So, there are ways they'll get around providing another alternative viewpoint there because it's not their view, it's the official government report. And if you look historically at how the fairness doctrine was applied, it was almost never applied in opposition to the government.
That's a reasonable statement.
Yeah.
Mr. Britt, I'm going to start with you on this one, and it may be unfair because this is a question that may or may not have as much application in your side of the world. I'm not sure. I just don't know. But over the past few years, a number of U.S. mainstream broadcasters have pretty much felt the consequences of their political incorrectness. The list of fired or otherwise punished includes such notables as Dan Rather, Don Imus, Bill O'Reilly, Luke Dobbs, Keith Olbermann, and of course the master of the irreverent, Howard Stern. My question, do you believe that political correctness has become more of a driving social force than freedom?
Wow, that's a good question. I have to say, yeah, to be honest, especially under the last British government, the Labour Party in
1956, Billy Graham wrote an article, I believe it was for Time magazine.
Pardon me.
The article...
Is that Roger?
Roger, yes.
Roger, hang on a second. Mr. Britt was in the middle of an answer, and
I apologize.
I'm sorry, Mr. Britt, did you finish, or were you cut off?
No, Roger started talking there, but if he wants to continue, that's okay.
Okay, go ahead, Roger.
I apologize. I heard dead air, and I'm a radio guy. When I hear dead air, I start talking.
I got it.
Did you not hear me speaking? Because I was speaking there.
Yeah, I think maybe I did. For some reason, I wasn't hearing you. I apologize for that.
Okay.
If I stepped all over you, I didn't do it intentionally. But I lost my train of thought now.
What we're talking about here is whether or not political correctness has somehow become more of a driving social force than freedom.
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, if you look up Billy Graham Tolerance 1956 on Google, Billy Graham wrote this interesting piece, and it's been a while, it's been several years since I read it, but the piece was about the dangers of this topic. We call it political correctness, but it's all about tolerance. We're all going to tolerate everybody. And so you have to read that to kind of get a defined and, I think a deeper interpretation of what this whole concept is about. This is a real evil, I think a satanically inspired concept, this thing we call political correctness or tolerance. I mean, I don't tolerate things that I don't like, and I shouldn't have to tolerate things that I don't like, and I don't like somebody telling me that I have to tolerate things that I don't like. And that just flies in the face of freedom. There are certain things I just flat out don't approve of, and so I don't want to be forced to accept things that I just find unacceptable. And that is a dangerous, dangerous line, because I think what it leads to ultimately, while we all run around trying to wash each other's backs and scratch each other's butts, in the end we're going to end up in a serious physical conflagration. It's going to lead to violence, because you can't live in a world where you're being forced to tolerate things that you find as abominable and disgusting.
And Mr. Britt, I just want to clarify there. I'm never certain what to make of the British people. They grew up under monarchy. They grew up under the monarchy. And so, I would think that puts them in the mindset of subjects. But is there a freedom movement? Is there a consciousness of individual freedom on a social level, on a societal level in England? Or has that been just buried away, in the history of monarchy?
Well, I have to say to you guys in the US, all of the action has been over in Europe. We've seen massive protests against government actions in England. We've seen it in France. We've seen it in Greece. And, I haven't seen many massive protests in the US. So people in the US are often looking at
touche!
Yeah, touche.
Yeah, and I'll tell you why that is. In the United States, if you protest like they're doing in Egypt, you'll be killed. And we have examples of that. I'll point to Kent State, I'll point to Waco. I can point to Kent State, or I can point to Waco, or I can take you back to Eisenhower's attack on World War I veterans, where they were murdered in the streets of Washington on footsteps of the White House.
Hang on a second.
But if you don't protest, then you're going to end up dead anyway, or in a concentration.
I'm just saying, in America, if you protest, you'll be killed.
But understand,
but is that a reason not to?
Mr. Britt, that's the problem we wrestle with. How do we get people to realize what you just said? If you do nothing, then it's a done deal no matter what. Yeah, that's always the problem. Ray Lynn, you had a question for Roger.
I know, but the discussion got so exciting with this that I've forgotten what my question for Roger was. Isn't that amazing? I just wanted to say that Wat Tyler's revolt set the standard for British subjects and American subjects. And I think if it weren't Wat Tyler, what was he, about 1600, somewhere around there? We wouldn't have had an American Revolution. And so it's the British feudal slaves that are the ones that, in my opinion, set the standard for revolution, and that is what is going on. Oh, I know what my question for Roger was. Roger, what do you feel about Angela Merkel and Sarkozy and what's his name, Cameron in the UK? They are all now saying that bringing these people. What is it that they're calling it over there? Diversity, or anyway, this politically correct bringing immigrants in and throwing them into their own ghettos and saying that everything is wonderful. They're all saying they made a mistake. What do you think of that?
Well, it is that proverbial camel's nose under the tent scenario. It feels good. It sounds good. It's nice to reach out and be kind, Open the floodgates to these poor people who are coming in peace, looking for a better life. But, the underclass in France, for example, is primarily people of the Islamic world, people who come there who are not the productive, hopeful citizens that they started out as being. And they've become a huge drain on an already drained socialist society. And because they don't offer up any real hope of prosperity for anyone in places like France, where everyone lives in this bizarre kind of socialist conundrum, these people are upsetting the balance because the resources are not there to carry the increasing load. And living in this fantasy of fiat currency has been fine, but the global banking cartels are crumbling. They may not admit it, but it's coming apart at the seams. You cannot have more money than you have resources in the system or it'll collapse. And so I think that if they think they're in trouble now, wait until this depression we're in finally runs its course. It's not going to be pretty.
This multiculturalism, it is killing the entire world. And what it is really doing, because as you said, they're Muslims, it is creating the Muslim caliphate.
Yes.
right in California, right in Ohio.
Caliphate is right. Caliphate's the right term.
Let me interrupt a second. We have a caller calling in, but I want to say there that it's very similar to forced integration. It's not forced, but it's similar. If you force people who don't necessarily naturally want to be together, if you force them together, you will just have problems because the cultures are different. And here, it's not so much they're forcing it, but they're encouraging these people to integrate without integrating the cultures into harmony with their new homes. And that's always going to be a problem. We have Randy.
I disagree with what you said. I don't even think they are encouraging people to integrate. I think they're leaving them there in their ghettos. And this is a whole new world order plan to break down the state and the nations and the countries. And that's what's happening.
All right, let's take our caller. Randy is calling in from Florida. Randy, thanks for waiting. Welcome to the show. You're on with our panel of broadcasters.
Given what we've seen transpire in Egypt today, why aren't we the people in America doing the same thing? And what would Obama do if we were to resort to a similar protest like what we've just seen in Egypt all week?
Was the question for anyone in particular or all three?
No, all of you.
Okay. Hey, Roger.
Well, please don't take this an insult, but I don't find any relationship between a dictatorship in Egypt and a process of a completely formed democracy in the West or republic, as we have in the United States, Republican democracy. At least the structure for elections exists here. I'm not sure our vote really counts, but at least there's a structure for it. There are parties. There's a process. They don't have any of that in Egypt. And these are people who've always lived under some kind of autocratic rule. They have no concept of freedom or elections or being in a democratic environment. It's going to be a much more difficult path than they think, and it'll probably be railroaded by the Muslim Brotherhood. And we're going to create a dangerous scenario in the Middle East, I'm sad to say, in Egypt in particular. I think a lot of people are going to die. I think Obama has made a Jimmy Carter error here, just as was done in Iran in the Shah's time before the Ayatollahs took over. And I think that we're going to see Egypt become a dangerous threat to Israel. Not that I'm any huge supporter of defending Israel. I think she can defend herself. But the point is that there's going to be conflict here. Egypt is going to be left without a leader, and it's going to be a wide gaping hole for somebody to try and assert their force there. And I think we're headed for some ugly times in Egypt.
I want to add something that most people don't know. I was at the Naval Postgraduate School in the 70s and the 80s, and we had many students from Egypt there. Those students learned about the American Constitution. They learned about the American way of voting. They learned about the freedoms that we have. And it wasn't just the Naval Postgraduate that had these students. Lots of Egyptian military came and studied here in the United States.